Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee with Joe, Volume 1. Today is August 28th, 2009. It's a Friday, and I want to welcome you to economicstability.org, the rational voice for monetary reform, our brand new website that is devoted to the study of the current broken debt money system of the private banks and also to the reform of that system, which is the U.S. Treasury issue of debt-free money. My partner in this venture is Joe Bongiovanni, a good friend of mine. He's also been a monetary reformer for 30 years, like his father before him. He has lots of opinions about the monetary system and how it might be reformed. Joe, how are you doing this morning?
Thank you, Pete. Yes, very good, thanks. I'm just fine down here in Harborton.
Can I remind you to take off your glasses, Joe, so that our audience can see your lovely blue eyes there? Um,
Okay, Pete.
Joe does a lot of studying. He has those glasses on a lot of the time. Joe's down in Harborton, Virginia. I'm up in Plainfield, Vermont. We've been friends for years, and we're going to be checking in with you folks once a week with information about current events, what you're reading in the news, in the newspapers this week, and how that bears on the issue of monetary reform, which is the mission of this site. Joe, Chairman Bernanke's been reappointed to another term. I guess he's been doing a great job. It looks like the economic crisis has bottomed out. I think we got the website up too late. The problems have passed. Can we go up to Kettle Pond and go fishing, or do we still need to work to reform this system?
Yeah, Pete. We definitely will be going up to Kettle Pond to do some fishing in the meantime. But it's well, Bernanke's only been renominated, Pete. Okay, he hasn't been reappointed. That's still up to the Congress. Our Congress to confirm Mr. Bernanke as the head chair of the Fed. Um, a big part of his job is a big part of the administration's job right now is to try to build confidence in the consumer. So it's not surprising to hear that things are going fabulously well from their perspective. And from my perspective, given that my perspective is that there's something, the money system is the problem and the cause of the problem. The activities, of the of the recent week, really just more fuel for the fire, Pete. The You can take either the banks crashing or the banks that are surviving, and either one of those are what I would consider to be moving in the direction of fragility, in the direction of brittleness, and increasing the brittleness of the system. And the reason I say that is this: if you take the banks that are failing, and when we have an increasing number of banks failing and getting on the failing watch list, meaning that we have that many more banks that we're going to have to deal with in some way or other, we see that the solutions that the FDIC is moving towards in terms of saving the banks is to open up the banking system to non-traditional, even in our private banking system, non-traditional entities. And by that I mean foreign banks being able to buy up some of the failed banks because we can't find, appropriate sound banks in this country to do that. And the introduction, or the idea that we're going to have private equity firms take over banks. And when we talk about the bank and the money system, and the fact that we have a homogeneous, if you will, banking and money system where the banks create the money, so the banks are the money system. The thing that we want to do is to try to introduce more stability and less potential for instability. And to me, to take foreign banks and private equity firms who don't have experience in banking, who don't have experience dealing with the communities where they would be lending, it's the opposite. It really is setting it up for further instability. So whatever we have out there in the way of activities in terms of the failed banks, the banking system itself failing, um, is to me horrendous. Quite frankly, I don't see anything out there that looks like it's anything is moving in the right direction. Um, the FDIC fund is, it's essentially depleted. You got way more banks and problem banks out there than that fund's going to be able to solve. And then you got the banks, that are the ones that have been saved by the largesse of the Fed and the TARP. And, what's happening with those guys? Well, the answer is that the guys that were too big to fail and that had to be put onto the respirator of taxpayer bailouts are getting bigger. You know, we're not having more diversification, and all of that, Pete, to me is just really portends more serious problems when the other shoe drops, and the other shoe is going to be dropping pretty soon, in my opinion. Although I'm not going to try to put a date on it, but we have many serious problems out here, like you mentioned.
There's several Fed transparency pieces of legislation in the Congress. What are your thoughts? Would those move us in the right direction?
Well, Ron Paul has for a long time called for an audit of the Fed. I'm a Ron Paul supporter and an Austrian supporter as far as ending the Fed and going to full reserve banking. Um, but 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 then Ron Paul wants us to get out of the money business, have the government out of the money business. But Dennis Kucinich's proposal, which is really something that was drafted by the American Monetary Institute's, researching directors, is something that would really go a long ways. And in fact, Pete, it is absolutely essential because we cannot have a transition to debt-free money without first having a truly comprehensive understanding of what is going on in the money system. Right now, because we have money that's created partially by the commercial banks and partially by the investment banks, leveraging at 30, 40, 50 to 1, the real relationships within the money system, that is to try to figure out how sound, the money system is, there is none. There's no soundness, and that doesn't exist. And we do need that. And the Fed is fighting it at every step. Not only the audit proposals, but also very much the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that was brought by Bloomberg News. And we've had a positive judge's ruling there. My fear is they're going to work something out. That's my honest fear, Pete. They will work something out, and we'll learn a little bit of something, and then the Fed will be able to say, well, we're transparent. So the secrecy, the brittleness, the growing gargantuan banks all portend a problematic money future, and that's why we need to, start to change it and get an exit strategy out of debt money.
To be continued next week on the second edition of Coffee with Joe. Thanks, Joe, and thanks for
Thank you.
listening. And we'll see you
Thank
all
you.
next week.